Two screams tear through the trees of Olmos Park, and then silence. By morning, a mother of four is gone. She was a marathoner, a top realtor, the steady center of a family. And months earlier, she told her banker a sentence that sounds like a prophecy. If I ever go missing, look for me in a lake. 3 facts you can't ignore. 1, a neighbor hears a fight outside, watches a woman break free, then cries from the woods. 2, in the hours that follow, a black pickup moves through the night and dawn. Top, ice chest, heavy-duty bags, caught again and again on camera. 3, investigators later say a reciprocating saw, hidden from sight, carries Suzanne's DNA. This case isn't just about a disappearance. It's about control, silence, and the moments when help arrives one day too late. Tonight, we follow the timeline minute by minute and ask, what drives someone to destroy the person they promised to love? You're watching The Guilty Crime Stories, where we bring you real cases that expose the darkest corners of human behavior and the pursuit of justice. I'm your host, and before we begin, please remember to subscribe if you believe every victim's story deserves to be heard. This episode contains sensitive material, including domestic violence, emotional abuse, and disturbing crime scene evidence. We share these details not for shock, but for awareness, to honor victims, and to remind us why speaking up matters. Out of respect for Suzanne Simpson and her family, we'll tell this story with the care and dignity it deserves. Tonight, we're going inside one of Texas's most haunting disappearances, the case of Suzanne Simpson, a 51-year-old mother, marathon runner, and luxury realtor from Olmos Park. On October 6, 2024, Suzanne vanished after a violent argument with her husband, Brad Simpson, at an exclusive private club. Within hours, neighbors reported screams from the woods behind their home. Days later, investigators uncovered surveillance footage, strange cash purchases, and a chilling note Suzanne had left with her banker, warning that if she ever went missing, they should look for her in a lake. Over the next 35 minutes, we'll follow the evidence trail, from that final night's timeline to the hidden weapons, forensic discoveries, and the case that still grips Texas today. For 51-year-old Suzanne Clark Simpson, life in Olmos Park, Texas, seemed picture-perfect. She was a successful luxury realtor, a devoted mother of 4, and a beloved friend in her community. Her days were filled with marathon training, family routines, and late-night calls with clients around the world, the portrait of discipline and joy. Colleagues admired her for her insight into the San Antonio property market. Friends called her a supermom, bright, driven, always smiling. Even her sister-in-law described her as an open book, someone who saw the positive in everything. But behind that light, something darker was forming. Her husband, Brad Simpson, was once seen as a respected investor and businessman. But over the years, his ventures began to crumble. Debt mounted, lawsuits followed, and friends started to notice a change. A man whose confidence was turning into control. Those closest to Suzanne began seeing signs, jealousy, tracking her phone, taking away her independence piece by piece. Then, in August 2024, 2 months before her disappearance, Suzanne made a quiet plea for help. Sitting across from her personal banker, she broke down and revealed that Brad had become physically abusive. She said he would confiscate her phone, tell their children she had lost it, and isolate her from the outside world. And then she said something that froze the room. She told the banker, "If I ever go missing, look for me in a lake." Those words would come to define the entire investigation. She never filed a police report. No protective order. No public confrontation. Like so many victims, she hid the bruises behind the walls of her home, hoping things would change. Her mother, Barbara Clark, knew of one previous incident, but Suzanne brushed it aside, saying it wasn't who Brad really was. Barbara had even made plans for Suzanne to move in with her, to start over with her youngest child. But Suzanne never got that chance. On October 6, 2024, Suzanne and Brad attended a private party at the Argyle, one of Texas's oldest and most exclusive members-only clubs. Guests noticed tension between the couple, an argument that grew heated enough for others to step in. Their 5-year-old daughter was with them that night. Hours later, the child would tell a school counselor that her father pushed Suzanne against a wall, hit her face, and hurt her elbow. That night marked the beginning of Suzanne's final hours. She left the party around 8:30 p.m. with her daughter, stopped briefly at a grocery store and made several desperate calls, one to a friend, another to her mother, saying she was in pain and Brad had hurt her again. Moments later, her husband cut off her phone service entirely. It was the last time anyone would hear her voice. That warning to her banker, "If I ever go missing, look for me in a lake," now echoes like a prophecy. What began as a quiet confession would soon become the key to unraveling everything that followed. It was a warm Sunday evening in Olmos Park, October 6, 2024. The air was still, the kind of night when nothing feels out of place. Suzanne and Brad had spent the day preparing for a social event at the Argyle, an exclusive, century-old private club in nearby Alamo Heights. They brought their 5-year-old daughter with them. Friends later described Suzanne as elegant and radiant that night, wearing a short dark dress, tall tan heels, and her sandy blonde hair tied neatly back. But behind the perfect image, the tension between them was visible. Multiple guests saw the couple arguing. Some said it was sharp words over money. Others, something deeper. Witnesses recalled Suzanne trying to walk away, but Brad wouldn't let it go. One woman told police the fight became so heated, it disrupted the atmosphere of the party. Later, Suzanne's little girl would tell her school counselor what really happened. Her father pushed Suzanne against a wall, hit her in the face and hurt her elbow. By around 8:30 p.m., Suzanne decided to leave the club. She gathered her daughter, said quiet goodbyes, and drove away into the night. Surveillance cameras captured her next stop, the H-E-B grocery store nearby. Between 8:40 and 8:51 p.m., she's seen on video walking calmly through the aisles with her daughter. She picks up a few small items, swipes her card and leaves. But the calmness in that footage hides what's coming. Just minutes later, at 9:15 p.m., Suzanne made a phone call to a close family friend, saying she was on her way over. She sounded shaken, tired, but determined. Then two things happened almost simultaneously. At 9:16 p.m., she called her mother, Barbara Clark, and said Brad had hurt her again. Her arm, her back, her neck were in pain. While she's on that call, Brad logs into their AT&T account and suspends Suzanne's phone service entirely. Within seconds, her connection goes dead. Despite that, Suzanne managed to reach her friend's house around 9:25 p.m. She spent less than an hour there trying to calm down. At 10:22 p.m., the Find My iPhone app showed her phone's location, back at the Simpson residence. That was the last recorded signal before the phone went dark forever. Between 10 and 11 p.m., a neighbor across the street was lying in bed when he heard raised voices. He stepped closer to his window and saw Brad and Suzanne in the front garden, arguing, the fight growing louder by the minute. He described seeing Suzanne trying to get away, Brad pulling her back, gripping her arms, dragging her down. She finally broke free and ran toward the wooded area east of the house. He told police Brad chased after her, disappearing into the trees. Moments later, the neighbor heard it, 2, maybe 3 screams. Then silence. Those were the last sounds anyone ever heard from Suzanne Simpson. The neighbor, shaken, went inside to grab a flashlight. When he returned, everything was quiet. A few minutes later, around midnight, he heard the ignition of Brad's black 2019 GMC Sierra start up. The truck backed out of the driveway and drove off into the night. 1 to 2 hours later, he heard it return. Investigators later pieced together what happened next, using digital data from Brad's phone. At 11:09 p.m., he began cycling his phone on and off in lockdown mode, a setting rarely used except by people trying to avoid being tracked. He continued this strange pattern for hours. Then just after midnight, surveillance footage from a nearby H-E-B parking lot showed Brad's truck again, this time with a large ice chest in the back. By 7:15 a.m., Suzanne's phone pinged for the last time in a business park in Olmos Park. The signal stopped there, permanently. Her phone has never been found. At 7:53 a.m., another camera, this one at Howard Early Childhood Center, captured Brad dropping off his daughter at school. In the truck bed, investigators would later note, were 2 white trash bags with red ties and that same large ice chest. He looked calm, composed, almost routine. Just minutes later, another piece of footage emerged, perhaps the most critical of all. At 9:12 a.m., a camera at a Whataburger drive-thru in Kendall County captured Brad's black GMC Sierra again. But now the contents had changed. In the cargo bed, 3 white trash bags, a heavy-duty trash bin, the ice chest, and a large, bulky object wrapped tightly in a blue tarpaulin, secured with a metal firewood rack on top. Weighing it down, the shape and size were unmistakable. Investigators would later write in their arrest affidavit that criminals often conceal and transport victims this way. Hidden, weighed down, wrapped to avoid detection. By 9:53 a.m., Brad's geolocation data placed him at a Home Depot in Bourne, Texas. Surveillance there showed him buying 2 bags of quick-reach cement, a bright orange bucket with a lid, a box of heavy-duty trash bags, a bottle of Clorox disinfectant spray, and insect repellent. He paid in cash, something investigators noted was unusual for him. In the parking lot, Brad approached a stranger and asked for directions to the nearest dump. Minutes later, his phone was switched off again. Between 10 and 11 a.m., data from his truck's GPS placed him near the Kendall County Solid Waste Facility. Shortly after, he stopped at a gas station, bought petrol and 2 one-gallon jugs of water. The white trash bags were now gone. The tarp, bin, and ice chest remained. His shoes had changed. No longer sandals, now dark cowboy boots. And then, his truck headed west toward Medina County. For about 13 minutes, he stayed in a remote area before heading back toward Bourne. When license plate readers picked up his truck again at 1:41 p.m., the blue tarp was gone, and the firewood rack had been repositioned. At 3 p.m., the school called. Suzanne hadn't picked up her daughter, something she never missed. Brad showed up nearly half an hour later. In the truck, only the ice chest and trash bin remained. That evening at 4:07 p.m., surveillance caught him again, this time at a car wash. He focused on the driver's side and rear left passenger areas, scrubbing hard. Later, police would find dried cement splashes inside the truck bed and back seat. By then, every other item seen that morning had vanished, and still, Brad didn't report Suzanne missing. He went through the entire day in silence, from those screams in the woods to a pickup scene leaving at midnight. Every frame of evidence begins tracing one horrifying question. What happened to Suzanne in those missing hours between the darkness and the dawn? By dawn on October 7th, Brad Simpson was already moving. The digital timeline, later reconstructed by investigators, revealed a series of deliberate, methodical steps, the kind that tell a story even without words. At 7:15 a.m., Suzanne's phone recorded its final bit of activity. GPS data placed it in a business park in Olmos Park, not far from the Simpson residence. After that, it went completely dark. Investigators believe this was the moment Brad disposed of the phone to erase any trace of communication or movement. Just half an hour later, at 7:53 a.m., surveillance cameras at Howard Early Childhood Center captured Brad dropping off his 5-year-old daughter in the truck bed. 2 white trash bags with red drawstrings and the same large ice chest, first seen hours earlier. Witnesses describe Brad as calm, collected even, wearing dark sunglasses. There was no sign of panic, no outward distress, just quiet mechanical control. Then came the footage that would become central to the prosecution's case. At 9:12 a.m., cameras at a Whataburger drive-thru in Kendall County caught Brad's black GMC Sierra again. But what investigators saw this time chilled them. In the back of the truck were 3 white trash bags, a heavy-duty rubbish bin, the ice chest, and something else, a large, bulky shape wrapped in blue tarpaulin. weighed down by a metal firewood rack on top. The outline beneath the tarp was irregular, unmistakably human in proportion. Detectives later noted in their affidavit that offenders often use this exact setup to conceal and transport a body, to hide, to disguise, to delay discovery. Minutes later, at 9:53 a.m., Brad pulled into a Home Depot in Bourne, Texas. Surveillance footage tracked every step. He selected 2 bags of quick-rete cement, a bright orange construction bucket, a box of 32 heavy-duty trash bags, a 30-ounce bottle of Clorox disinfectant spray, and a can of insect repellent. He paid in cash, a notable departure from his normal pattern of card payments. In the parking lot, he approached a man and casually asked for directions to the nearest dump. Then his phone went back into lockdown mode, cycling on and off, a trick that later digital forensics would interpret as an effort to evade GPS tracking. Between 10 and 11 a.m., his truck's geolocation pinged near the Kendall County solid waste facility. He stayed there for roughly 20 minutes. Whatever he disposed of, there was never recovered. When he left, he stopped at a petrol station in Bourne, buying 2 gallons of water and more fuel. This time, the white trash bags were gone from the truck bed, but something else had changed too. Brad had switched shoes, no longer sandals, now wearing dark cowboy boots. Investigators took note. Every detail mattered. His truck then traveled west toward Bandera County into more rural terrain. He stayed there approximately 13 minutes before turning back toward Bourne. At 1:41 p.m., a license plate reader picked up the truck again. The blue tarp was gone. The firewood rack had been repositioned, and whatever had been underneath was gone forever. At 3 p.m., the school called the Simpson home. Suzanne hadn't arrived to collect her daughter. That had never happened before. By 3:27 p.m., Brad appeared casual as ever. Inside the truck bed, only the ice chest and trash bin remained. Everything else, the tarp, the rack, the bags, had vanished. Less than an hour later, he pulled into Bubble Bath Car Wash on San Pedro Avenue. Security footage showed him focusing intensely on the driver's side door and rear left passenger seat, the very areas later found to contain dried cement splashes. In the bed of the truck, only the ice chest remained. That afternoon faded into evening. The sun went down, and Suzanne was nowhere to be found. Yet Brad said nothing. No 911 call, no missing person report, not even a text to friends. Just silence. Piece by piece, the timeline starts to harden, cement, tarp, and silence, forming a pattern too deliberate to ignore. The house of evidence was only beginning to take shape, and investigators were about to enter it. At the Bubble Bath Car Wash on San Pedro Avenue, Brad's GMC Sierra rolled slowly into lane 3. Surveillance footage showed him working in silence, wiping the driver's door, scrubbing the rear seat, vacuuming the back. Every motion looked focused, mechanical, controlled. When police would later examine the truck, they found dried cement splashes across the rear floor and in the bed, the same quick-rete he'd purchased that morning. The ice chest remained. Everything else was gone, but what was most disturbing wasn't what he cleaned, it was what he didn't do. He didn't call the police. He didn't report Suzanne missing. The entire day passed with no message to family, no concern shown to friends. A wife vanished, and Brad said nothing. At 9:57 p.m., nearly 24 hours after anyone had heard from Suzanne, a friend called Brad, alarmed. She asked if he had contacted police. He hadn't. She warned that she would file a missing person report herself. Just 14 minutes later, Brad left a voicemail for Olmos Park Police Chief Fidel Villas. "Hey, I haven't seen Suzanne since around 11 last night. Think she lost her phone at HEB. The story didn't match the data. Investigators already knew Suzanne's phone had been home at 10:22 p.m. before Brad personally suspended her mobile service. That voicemail wasn't confusion. It was fabrication. The next day, detectives scheduled a follow-up interview. Brad never showed. Instead, he drove west to his ranch property in Bandera County, separating himself from the search entirely. At 4:35 p.m., he sent a frantic text to his old business partner. James Cotter, if you're in Bandera, can you haul ass and meet me at your house? I don't have much time. Cotter replied he'd be there in 40 minutes. Brad's next text was darker. Okay, make sure you leave all that stuff in the pump house, especially that gun. Later that night, Cotter texted back, "Get over here. I won't tell anyone. You're my brother." By then, Brad had created 2 notes on his iPhone, titled This Next Life and Last Will and Testament. In them, he apologized for assaulting Suzanne, once in August 2023, and again on the night of October 6, 2024. He also phoned his brother, saying he was sorry for everything he'd caused. Hours later, at 1:30 a.m., police arrested him off Interstate 10 East in Kendall County. He was charged with assault, family violence, and unlawful restraint. On his arms and hands were fresh bruises and lacerations. Officers noted how calm he seemed, not shocked, not frantic, just empty. When asked about Suzanne, he showed no emotion, no urgency. He invoked his right to an attorney and refused to cooperate further. Behind him, the search for Suzanne was only beginning. Now investigators start pulling threads. The truck, the cement, the guns, the phone. And with each one they tug, another hidden piece of Brad Simpson's world begins to unravel. When detectives searched the Simpson home, the picture grew darker. Inside, investigators found a fresh indentation on the wall near the base of the staircase, consistent with Suzanne's 5-year-old daughter's account that Brad had pushed her mother against the wall the night of the party. In the garage, officers discovered 1 bag of quick-reach cement, even though receipts and footage showed he had purchased 2. They found a heavy-duty black trash bin, a box of 32 black garbage bags, with 4 missing, and the metal firewood rack seen weighing down the tarp in Brad's truck, the family's housekeeper. Later confirmed that the Simpsons normally used white trash bags with red ties, exactly the kind spotted in his pickup bed earlier that morning. Then came the weapons. Inside a locked gun room, police uncovered multiple firearms, including an unlicensed short-barrel rifle, which immediately triggered federal weapons charges. The more they searched, the more it felt like they were standing inside the epicenter of a cover-up. 2 days later, on October 9, 2024, Texas Rangers arrived at the family's ranch in Bandera County. Behind the stables, they found a burn site, fresh ash, scorched soil, and partially melted electronics. In the debris, a burnt laptop and 3 mobile phones, all registered to Brad Simpson. Everyone had been deliberately destroyed by fire. Detectives knew what that meant. The digital trail was being erased. Still, the investigation pressed forward. On October 21st, search warrants extended to James Cotter's home in the Dominion, an upscale gated community. Cotter was Brad's old business partner, the one who'd exchanged those cryptic texts days after Suzanne's disappearance, acting on a tip from a confidential witness. Police were told to look behind the bedroom television. What they found there changed the case yet again. Hidden behind the mounted screen, inside a hollowed-out wall compartment, was a fully automatic AK-47 rifle. Forensic records later confirmed it came from Brad's private gun vault. Removed by Cotter 2 days after Suzanne went missing, Cotter was arrested on charges of tampering with evidence and possession of prohibited weapons. His bail was set at $1 million. The chain of concealment was spreading, and detectives knew there was more buried beneath the surface. And then, the discovery that would define the entire case. A hidden tool, ordinary on the surface, monstrous in context. Investigators found it deep in evidence storage, and everything changed. The reciprocating saw. In December 2024, 2 months after Suzanne vanished, detectives uncovered what would become the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Hidden among Brad Simpson's stored tools, investigators recovered a reciprocating saw, an electric handheld motorized blade designed to cut through wood, metal, and bone. Forensic tests revealed Suzanne Simpson's DNA on the blade. It was the break investigators needed. With no body, no confession, and no witness to her death. The discovery of that saw tied Brad directly to the act of concealment and likely to murder. On December 5, 2024, a grand jury handed down a formal indictment charging Brad Simpson with murder, tampering with evidence with intent to impair a human corpse, and possession of prohibited weapons. His bond was set at $5 million. Lead prosecutor Casey Sandoval stated publicly, "The law doesn't reward people who hide or destroy their victims. Even without a body, the evidence was strong. The timeline, the surveillance, the cement. And now, the saw, Brad's defense attorney Stephen Gilmore countered quickly. On December 3rd, he filed a motion to quash the indictment, calling it vague, indefinite, and uncertain. Gilmore argued that because prosecutors couldn't specify how Suzanne died, no weapon of death, no medical examiner's report, the state couldn't possibly prove murder beyond reasonable doubt. But prosecutors fired back. Under Texas law, they didn't need to show the exact mechanism, only that Brad intended to kill and caused Suzanne's death. The case went before Judge Joel Perez in April 2025. For 2 days, both sides presented their arguments. Gilmore emphasized the missing body, claiming speculation cannot substitute for evidence. Sandoval responded that the evidence was the act, the tracking, the purchases, the silence, the saw. On April 29th, Judge Perez issued his ruling. The indictment would stand. The court found that prosecutors had presented sufficient probable cause. The murder charge would proceed to trial. The decision marked a crucial victory for investigators, proof that even without a recovered body, justice could still move forward. A no-body prosecution is rare and risky, but this one carries layers of evidence, a digital trail, and a haunting timeline. It moves forward not on guesswork, but on precision, motive, and silence. In the months that followed, investigators combed through every possible lead. Search teams spread across 3 Texas counties, the wooded areas behind the Simpson home, the highways where Brad's truck had been seen, and the ranch in Bandera County. Cadaver dogs, drones, and divers scoured lakes and back roads. But even after hundreds of hours, Suzanne's body was never found. Texas DPS spokesperson Dion Cockrill told reporters, "We don't stop looking. Whether it's a year, 2 years, or 10, there's always a chance she'll be found." A year later, the community of Olmos Park still held vigils in Suzanne's name. Then, in November 2024, Suzanne's eldest daughter Chandler broke her silence. In a powerful Instagram post, she wrote, "My father took my mother's life in a state of rage and control. Women in Alamo Heights are told to stay quiet. This is the time to speak. Speak for my mom." The post went viral, rallying survivors, neighbors, and advocates for domestic violence awareness across Texas. Chandler and her siblings have continued to push for justice, promising to be their mother's voice until she is found. By September 2025, prosecutors confirmed that discovery was complete. Over 6 terabytes of evidence. From surveillance footage to forensic data, Brad Simpson remains held in administrative segregation at Bexar County Jail. 23 hours a day in isolation. Pre-trial hearings are set for January 20th, 2026, and the murder trial begins February 13th, 2026. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but they're still turning. And Texas will not stop until they find Suzanne. When you step back from the evidence, the cameras, the receipts, the data, what's left is a pattern that's all too familiar. It starts with control, then isolation, then silence. Suzanne's story reminds us that abuse often hides behind perfect photos, polite smiles, and beautiful homes. It's not always loud. It's not always visible. It's quiet until one night it isn't. Many ask, why didn't she leave? But the truth is, she tried. She made plans. She reached out. Like thousands of women and men each year, Suzanne faced an abuser who turned love into power and control into punishment. If you or someone you know feels unsafe, say something today. Tell a friend, a neighbor, a doctor. You don't have to have proof. You just have to have fear. That's enough. Call your local domestic violence helpline. In the US, you can reach the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE 7233 or visit thehotline.org. For international viewers, please find your country's hotline in the description below. As a community, we can't always predict the next tragedy, but we can listen, believe, and act when someone whispers, "I'm scared." Suzanne's case isn't just about what was lost. It's about what we can still change. Awareness saves lives. Silence does not. 1 year later, Suzanne Clark Simpson is still missing. Her family still waits. Her community still searches. And investigators, from local police to the Texas Rangers, continue to follow every new lead. Somewhere, someone knows what happened that night. Maybe you saw something. Maybe you remember a truck, a sound, a strange movement near the woods. Even the smallest detail could matter. If you have any information about the whereabouts of Suzanne Simpson, please contact the Olmos Park Police Department at 21108-222-00 or reach out to Texas Crime Stoppers at 1-800-252-TIPS. You can remain anonymous. Her children, Chandler, Jackson Hunter, and little Ava, continue to live with unanswered questions. They deserve closure. They deserve peace. Here on the Guilty Crime Stories, we tell these cases not just to remember the victims, but to remind ourselves that justice begins with awareness. Every view, every share, every conversation helps keep Suzanne's name alive. If this story moved you, share this video. Help bring Suzanne home. Subscribe to the Guilty Crime Stories for more real investigations told with respect and truth. Comment below with your thoughts, and let's continue this conversation with empathy, not speculation. For Suzanne, for her children, for every silent victim still waiting to be heard, justice remembers the ones we cannot forget.